Divorce is often one of life's most challenging experiences, emotionally, legally, and financially. But it doesn't have to feel so overwhelming. Welcome to the Smarter Divorce podcast, where legal expertise meets financial insight, empowering you to make informed decisions every step of the way.
Hello, thank you for joining us. Welcome to the Smarter Divorce podcast. I'm Jane McAuliffe. I'm a certified divorce financial analyst, and I work in the divorce financial planning space. And I'm here with my co-mediator, attorney Kerry Raffinelli. Kerry, hello.
Hello, Jane. Hello, Shelley.
And today we have a very special guest with us. We're going to be talking about all things therapy, all things related to maybe some personality disorders that we might see, or conflicts that may arise during the divorce or mediation process, things to think about, support that you may need, all things relating to the emotional side of things of divorce, which is, I handle most of the financial aspects. Kerry usually handles most of the legal aspects, but Shelley works a lot in the emotional space. Welcome, Shelley.
Hi, it's great to be here.
Thank you for joining us. Shelley is the owner, and she is a therapist at Rising Tides Counseling Center and also Finding Tiny Joys here in East Greenwich, Rhode Island. So Shelley works firsthand with clients who are contemplating divorce, going through a divorce, or post-divorce. And recently we had the pleasure of working with Shelley and her former spouse through the mediation process here. So we're hopefully going to talk about maybe a little bit about your personal experience going through mediation, and as it relates to how you talk about clients to make the next step going forward. So Shelley, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background for our viewers so they get a sense of what you do?
Sure. I am the owner and therapist of a group practice as well as a private practice. I work with kids all the way to seniors, really every age group, every situation. My focus is really holistic practice. I focus in family systems, trauma, and grief. The group practice, really the therapist range, and really work with different therapy strategies that are needed for individuals, couples, families. I think that's it for me. I'm a mom of 4. They're all adults now. The baby just turned 18.
Nice.
And recently divorced. So I'm here for all of this.
Yeah, you can give it both the professional and the personal lens as it relates to the emotional side of things.
Absolutely.
So yeah, that's why we thought it would be so valuable to have you here. And I think today what our goal is to not only give you some financial to-dos, some legal to-dos, and also some things, specific action items on the emotional side of things that you can take away. So stick around for the whole episode so you can catch that. But my business is called Collaborative Divorce Strategies. I work with Kerry Raffinelli. We work with both individuals and couples who are going through the divorce and mediation process. So we kind of do both aspects of it. Kerry, do you want to share a little bit about the legal perspective of what you bring to both the cases and mediation?
Sure. I, as an attorney that practices law in Rhode Island, I've done the whole realm of a divorce, which includes custody, placement, support of children, an area that would connect with Shelley, because oftentimes not only the children going through distress, but the parents are going through distress. So Shelley can break down for us the importance of parental counseling for themselves, counseling for the children, or even co-parenting counseling. So that it's always very important for the whole family to get the assistance as opposed to treatment that they require to get through this difficult process. It's one of the most difficult years of your life. Without being too dark, there's death of people, and then there's the passing, if you will, of some relationships. but it's very important for the parents to connect together so that that lifeline still exists as to best co-parenting with themselves and for their children, or getting the assistance that the children need. Because while the marriage is ending for the parties, it's not, the relationship's not ending for the children. So I think that that's what family law needs to deal with when we get to court. But lawyers and judges themselves don't have the tools for that. Therapists like Shelley are absolutely required.
Yeah. And I love how you said not only for the folks who are going through divorce, but so important for children who can be so greatly affected through this process. And a lot of that depends on how the parents are acting as they move through this. Correct, Shelley?
Yes, it is. It is imperative for the parents to at least act a certain way in front of their children, to make sure that the kids feel the stability is still there. They'll be okay. They'll work through things. Yeah, there are many things in therapy that we help navigate how those conversations can be had, to help the family stay connected as best they can.
Yeah, I think that's important. One of the questions that I get asked a lot from the emotional side of things is, when people are facing this decision, they wonder how best to tell the children. Like, is there one magical way to do it, Shelley?
It was such a difficult thing, personally, and I really had to take from kind of my notes as a therapist and doing it personally for myself. Really telling the kids, giving the kids the information that they're seeking. I think age appropriate is really important. So sharing that, the parents will be in two different houses, but it doesn't take away from the love that they have for the kids, recognizing that there's stability in school and relationships. That's really important. But as the kids get older, different information needs to be shared. So navigating that can be tricky. For myself, it really was like a family meeting. We all sat at the dining room table and had a really hard conversation. And I think, having everybody there was really supportive. It was better than doing it individually, which I think can be really difficult if there's more than one kid.
Yeah.
Having a therapist is really great because they all had access to go talk to somebody afterwards to kind of process what it means.
It's great advice. Yeah, because above all, no matter what the conflict between spouses are, or even non-conflict, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't even have to be in conflict with your spouse. You're still going to be dealing with a lot of emotions surrounding the kids and making sure that they have that network of professionals that can give them, the tools to work with it.
Right.
Well, I know that Kerry's had extensive experience being a guardian ad litem. And I think, from the standpoint where people find themselves in a custody battle, Kerry, I guess, what would be your experience in using mental health counselors in scenarios like that? Like you mentioned before, co-parenting counseling, how does that come into play to those high conflict cases when they can't agree on how to be sharing custody with their kids?
Right. Well, the primary reason for mediating is to avoid all of that. But if you are down that path of high conflict, the court appoints a guardian ad litem who's an attorney who represents the best interests of the children. And there's 8 factors in Rhode Island, the pet natto factors, so-called, one of which is the mental and physical health of the parties. And so the therapist is involved to deal with mental health, deal with what's going on in each of the parties' lives. And that's all in tandem with 2 of the factors, which are the preference of the children, if the children of sufficient age, intelligence, and understanding to express a preference. That's where the therapist helps out. And then, of course, the preference of the parents, which is oftentimes very well stated, mom's side, dad's side, guardian's side, in terms of the dynamic of who are the guardians of the children. But that's what the court looks for. It looks for the mental health of the parties through the therapist. A qualified therapist like Shelley can, depending on the role, you're either the therapist for the child, or you're the independent evaluator, or you're the therapist for either the parents. They report back to the court, and the court considers that information in making a decision. Ultimately, I think people can still fit into the mediation model by still having that assistance through therapists, because the difference between going to court where there's a judge or staying in mediation is you are the judges of the best result. You, as the parents of the children, can judge what's best. Oftentimes, I don't think you need an independent third person called a judge to make decisions which will be pro or con. It's so difficult to get a positive result, not because of the judge, but because there's so many countervailing interests when you get to court, that by the time it's all over, no one truly knows what was best for their children, and litigation does not achieve what's best for your children. So learning what your children are saying through therapy, and learning what the parents need to address through therapy, and then taking all that information to mediation is the best result.
I think that's why I enjoy working with Kerry so much, because that is not my domain at all. I can't stand dealing with the emotional and child custody aspect, but you seem to cut right through that. And even in the most conflicted mediation cases, right? Mediation thinks, oh, you have to be a, happy couple to come to mediation. No, you don't. Actually, sometimes it's the last stop before a trial. So we get people at all range, right? Very amicable. And also we get high conflict cases as well. But Kerry's really great at navigating that piece of the kid custody and helping to kind of dive into the emotional layers from each party standpoint. So Shelley, wanted to ask you, I know your range of clients, right, range from people who are contemplating divorce, people going through divorce, and people post-divorce. I guess share with our viewers what you're finding are your clients' top concerns as they're maybe in each stage, or maybe it's all together. What are their top concerns from a therapy standpoint that they want to address?
Sure. So people coming into my office that are contemplating divorce, I would say even pre-contemplation, when they're just talking about their relationship and things that may not be working for them. Usually that leads us to contemplating, because we've had enough time to reflect and talk about what their needs are and if they can be met in their relationship that they have right now, or if they need to end the relationship. Really, a lot of times, because I see mostly women currently, I would say children is the first thing. What will it do to my children? If they've experienced parents that got divorced, then they have their own experiences as a child. So oftentimes it really triggers kind of their past hurts and what they experienced. So we work through that. So children is really the number one. And if there aren't children, or even if there are, the second is financial. Whether they're a two-income family and just trying to navigate how to keep the kids in the same school system and pay for everything that they've always done, that's always a challenge. And a lot of times, one person in the relationship is responsible for the finances. Oftentimes, the women are not that person in my experience. And so they have a lot of questions about how do I make a budget? How do I live on a budget? How can I survive a divorce and come out the other side and not give up the lifestyle that I've become accustomed to and my children have become accustomed to, which is where we find your services to be so helpful. And in my personal life, definitely the financial aspect of having Jane on board was really, it made a lot of clarity for me, and I've really appreciated even some of those tips now that I'm using.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I agree with Shelley. again, most of my clients tend to be the unmoneyed spouse, right? The spouse that has not been involved in the finances, the spouse that may not be the breadwinner, the spouse that might be home taking care of the children. Um, and they feel terrified, to be quite honest with you, about what that looks like after the fact, right? And even just to even make uh, agreements as they go along. They're terrified to make a decision because they don't know if they're making the right decision. They don't know where they're going to live. They don't know how they're going to maybe re-enter the workforce or get a different job that might help them make more. So it's so many different multiple layers of, from the financial advising standpoint. Not only are we doing the education, hand holding, the thinking, the 360 thinking for people who are not only uneducated from the financial standpoint, but also are in this huge emotional space where, as you know, when you're going through a divorce, it's really takes up so much of your headspace that it makes it really hard to think clearly through, okay, I think this might be the best way to go, or I need to be thinking of this, this, and this. I'm doing all of that clear-headed thinking for my clients to say, okay, let's look at scenario A, scenario B. This is what we need to be thinking about, and this is what needs to be baked into your marital settlement agreement. And with Kerry's help from the legal side, we get a lot of clarity around that so that people can feel good about making those decisions. It's all about education and empowering clients to have a seat at the table, to have a level playing field with their partner and not feel as if they're going to get bullied or, talked down to or whatever. We're bringing the whole level of the conversation up so that it makes the discussions about a financial settlement smoother for both parties, right? It helps with clarity and visualization where we're all working with the same numbers. But yeah, so I do work with the unmoneyed spouse. Oh, and we're going to talk a little bit after this when we talk about the top, we obviously talk about the top concerns, but also personality traits that might lend or blend into how people react to not only their finances, but also react during this process. I know that you mentioned the financial and the children, and we talked a little bit about this as we were prepping for this episode. A lot of people, myself included, who are thinking about this often come in and they say, I really want to get a divorce and I'm going to pull that trigger as soon as my kids are out of the house. And as a therapist, and from your perspective, what kind of honest feedback could you give folks who are watching this episode if they are thinking that way?
Right. I see that a lot because a lot of people don't want to cause trauma for their kids. Potentially it's because they experienced that as a child themselves with their parents getting divorced. So the couple of people that I've had that come in and said, I'm just going to wait for my kids to graduate high school and then I will leave him, or then I will make that decision. I would say that you may be causing more harm by waiting. I often say they're watching you. They're paying attention to what you're accepting or how your relationship is evolving, and we tend to copy the actions of our parents. So it's not in the words necessarily, but by watching these two people really struggle in a relationship, we're teaching our kids that it's okay to accept that and that struggle. So it really is not healthier to stay. It is okay to make that choice while your kids are younger and showing them that you can make different choices, that you can go through mediation and be out on the other side as friends. That's the goal, right? The goal is to change the relationship, not necessarily have the relationship disappear. For many of us, that's the goal.
Right. And from a legal standpoint, Kerry, when the kids are out of the house, how does that change the picture, and why would mediation be a better place to kind of iron that out? Because as we all know, the children, once they turn 18, are no longer under the court's jurisdiction. But as we all know, young adult children are still a factor when it comes to the financial responsibility of the parents.
Well, I think mediation works positively in both ends, from children from 0 to 18, as I like to say, and then thereafter. You own them for 18 years; they own you thereafter. So how you handle it will determine how often they come back, what kind of relationship they maintain. Uh, Weddings, holidays, etc., are very important. But on the positive side, the mediation is good for 0 to 18 in terms of establishing a schedule that just makes sense. You don't need a third party guardian ad litem or a judge to be helping you with alternating weekends, midweek possession or visitation, holidays, etc. Those holidays all come once a year, every year. That can all be codified. For the child that's over 18 that may be still acting like a child but is in college or are still requiring a financial support, mediation is very helpful, because while the court doesn't have jurisdiction, as you stated, the court can't in Rhode Island tell one parent what they must pay, what they have to pay. But two parents can come together on their own to determine what they can afford, what they can contribute, and how that'll get done. Because just because they go off to their freshman year in college, it clearly does not mean they're independent. They might be independent of what time they eat and what time they go to bed, but they're certainly dependent on the financial resources of the parent. And so why would you just live your life on what's the jurisdiction of the court when the jurisdiction of parents is to do what's best for your children all the way until the appointed time that you've now shepherded them to, whether that's freshman year or senior year or graduate school. They're still your children. They'll still always depend on parents. And so mediation brings you together in the same setting. It works it out. It does come to the point where what you can afford and what you can't afford, and what your children must have to come to the reality of where they can go to school based upon what the financial circumstances of the parents are. But as you know, I'm a big fan of mediation. Bring it to the get. You can still rely on independent legal counsel to tell you what you're obligated to do or not do. But what you have to do, what you don't have to do, is not what's important here. It's what you want to do together for and on behalf of your children.
Correct. Yeah. So we talked a little bit about what kind of behavior themes that we sometimes see. I mean, I can honestly say that sometimes I work with the avoidant spouse, or the spouse who has some avoidant tendencies. Like, they haven't been as involved in the finances because it feels scary to them or overwhelming to them, and they just sort of avoid that topic altogether. And then when something traumatic like this happens, especially if it's a surprise and it's not something they're choosing, it can be extremely traumatic and, again, terrifying. But we also see some other types of behavioral traits. And so, Shelley, I wanted to pick your brain about, what you see as maybe some particular stumbling blocks, and then also how do you help clients work through dealing with someone like that in a situation such as divorce or mediation?
Sure. Yeah, oftentimes, even the contemplation of divorce, if the couple has met and discussed it, brings a reactivity from the people individually. So sometimes their old traumas come back up, or you'll see narcissistic tendencies, or controlling, abusive behaviors can come up when there's a loss of control, or not agreeing with the decision to split. So we definitely deal, I'm sure you do as well, deal with the emotional side of it and the reactivity, how to diffuse some of that in conversations if that is safe. However, if it's not safe, then the conversation in therapy is really acknowledging their position, what they have control over. It's very often like, there are many things you cannot control. You cannot control your spouse's behaviors, but you can calm yourself and you can respond in ways that are appropriate. So a lot of empowering happens, and acknowledging where the behaviors are coming from so that the person I'm seeing doesn't feel responsible for the other party's behaviors, and just accepting their own individual experience. And working through divorce, it is a really difficult year. It's really traumatic for each person, and if you're navigating it with children, you're also trying to support the kids. So it's not just the individual person.
Yeah.
Usually the mom is trying to support the kids and support the spouse that they're leaving.
Correct.
Yeah. So yeah, we see a
That's
lot of different behaviors.
that's great. Yeah, we again from the one of the I also said, I work with clients who have avoidance issues, but I also see cases where, and Kerry, you've seen this, where there might be potential financial infidelity or financial abuse, where, when this revelation comes upon uh, maybe the out spouse who hasn't been involved, they're quite shocked to really learn about what their financial situation might be like. Either, it wasn't what they thought it was. Oh, I trusted my spouse all these years, and it's really not what it's shaken out to be. Or, my spouse is controlling all the money, and I don't have any money to do this. So our role, Carrie and my role, is to really give them the tools to start to get to learn and get their arms around what their financial picture looks like. And I can tell you what my first steps are for folks who are in that situation. And Shelley, I'd love to know what you talk to clients about as your, to-do list, right? Like, let's start this process of your fear is finances. Okay, what are we going to tell our clients to do? For me, it's as simple as you've got to start doing a rough sketch of what your budget looks like. And okay, in a perfect world, if all things stayed the same, where would I like to live? What do my current expenses look like? And then, people do have this notion, well, I'm entitled to a certain lifestyle, but sometimes that's not the reality when you're going through a divorce. So, I'm helping people say, okay, this might not be achievable through divorce. Like, your same standard of living might not be possible. And if so, what does plan B look like? And what does plan C look like? So for me, very critical, budgeting is huge, because that's going to tell us a lot about what the needs are, and also how does that relate to the support from a financial standpoint in a divorce, and also how does that relate to the division of the overall assets based on what clients need, right? So budgeting is a critical step, number one. Number two, I would tell people to start looking at collecting documents, all documents related to your assets. Do you have savings and checking accounts? Do you have retirement accounts? Do you have investment accounts? Do you have loans on certain things? Start collecting all those documents. Look at your tax returns. Some clients don't even sign their tax returns. Like, their clients sign it for them and they've never looked at a tax return, for the past 5 years, right? So start doing all of that. That's it's very, very important to start collecting documents to see what you got. The third is to start thinking about plan A and plan B, right? I want people to be realistic, and part of our jobs, Shelley, you know this, Kerry, you know this, is, I'd say it's the hardest part of the job, is managing clients' expectations, right? We have to be prepared for the worst case scenario, and we have to be prepared for, what they think is their best case scenario, and what's everything in between. What are all the potential outcomes in between that? So that's where I'm focusing clients and getting them not only educated, but feeling a little more confident, or at least more educated around making financial decisions. Shelley, I guess, what would your to-do list be? And then Kerry will go to you from the legal standpoint.
Sure. If they aren't already in my office or in Rising Tide's office, I would say get yourself an outside perspective in counseling, because it is so emotionally just difficult to manage on your own, it is so helpful to have that support. The other thing, because I often see people in this like contemplative stage, I would say, kind of piggybacking on what you said about figuring out a budget, is opening a bank account or having your own credit card. Like those things, I recommend for people. Have your name on something. Even when you're talking about opening utility bills and acknowledging what the cost is, are their names on any of those things so that they have credit? That's really important.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So those are really the two things that kind of.
I know you mentioned having support from a therapy standpoint. I can't say enough how important it is to have an outside neutral therapist who doesn't really know your family situation, doesn't know your spouse maybe that well, because so many clients come in and they say, well, my best friend said this, and I'm trying to make a decision, and my mother's in my ear telling me that I should not be settling for that, and that's so unfair, right? How many times do we hear that?
All the time.
They've got all these people who are so emotionally attached to them in their lives, and also probably to their financial picture too, like maybe their kids or their sister or whoever is attached to them, and they're listening to all these people, and we tell them all the time, you cannot take the outside opinion of anybody that you're close to in this situation. You really need a neutral third party who is not attached. And Kerry and I say it all the time, like, we are not attached to your stuff. We are neutrals, trying to help you navigate, trying to be your voice of reason. And we are professionals who are dealing in the divorce space. So we, for instance, Kerry and the law, how many people come in and say, my best friend got divorced and they got the house and they got this and I'm getting screwed. Like, how many times do we hear that, right?
Yes, often. So yes, I mean, it's what you hear from others, it's what you hear from counsel, and then it's ultimately what you can afford. It comes back to budgets, and it comes back to the strength of getting divorced. The parties have to have expectations, and that oftentimes happens from speaking with independent counsel. While mediation is getting involved without lawyers, it's also good to know that you have the opportunity to speak with an independent attorney to get perspective. Because once you know what you can attain by the law, you have better perspective about what you should be seeking in the mediation itself. So the law is applied to all of it. Mediation allows you to ask for things that you otherwise might not receive. At times it can allow people to take less than what they ordinarily would receive. But I always come back to the most important judges in the case are your children as to how you conducted yourself, and yourselves as to how you handled that. Because as Shelley pointed out, that will be a reflection on what your children think of you going forward.
Correct. One last thing about, addictive behavior and personalities. I know, Shelley, we talked a little bit about this, like when clients slide into certain addictions during this process, that can be certainly a big black rabbit hole that people can slide into from the emotional standpoint. Again, triggering dependencies that are unhealthy, right? And working through that. I guess I would leave it to you to say how best to give advice on that from a therapist standpoint.
Sure. Well, the process is so difficult to acknowledge that your relationship is ending or changing, and you're dividing everything. And if there's a family, you've got children involved, we do tend to slip back into maladaptive coping skills. So whether it's drinking or benzodiazepines can be really helpful to reduce symptoms of our nervous system being completely awry. We use those to help us kind of numb out the depths of despair and pain and whatever we're working through. And people, they think therapy is very expensive. However, when it comes down to it, using these maladaptive coping skills can really be much more expensive and destructive on the family. But because of the trauma and what they're dealing with, it does heighten the possibility for those addictions to come back up. And so then we have to work through those on top of trying to manage all of the other things.
Yeah. It's so important to have, you know, licensed and professionals in the field that can help clients, you know, face that and work through that before it slides off the rails,
Right.
before the cheese comes off the cracker, as Kerry likes to say.
That may be a little out of context, but that's all right. Their cheese has slipped off their cracker.
Yes. All right. So, and then Shelley, as I mentioned earlier in the podcast, we're about to wrap up, but you know, from your own perspective, I know that you came through the process with your former spouse. You came through the mediation process here with Kerry and I, and just wanted to get, you know, your perspective on, you know, from a personal standpoint, just some feedback on how the process went and why you recommend it to clients who are going through this.
Sure, that's an easy question. So watching other people go through the divorce process and hiring lawyers and watching kind of the issues escalate over time through the process and becoming, you know, more divisive almost by having two individual lawyers kind of navigating that. Mediation seemed like the way to go. Sitting down with both of you and my ex, we were able to really kind of have these conversations, like you said, lifted up. So we kind of avoided a lot of the depth of emotion and the difficulty, and you helped us kind of navigate what was important. Each session with you, we were able to kind of work through a set of expectations for the session. There was always humor. We left a couple of times, like going to grab appetizers and talk through it, which was really weird and also enjoyable. I think in the end, we were able to have the divorce that we deserved. The relationship, you know, is better because of it. I think if we had separate attorneys, it could have looked a lot different. But because we were present, we were able to navigate that together. But you two really diffused some of the difficulty with some lighthearted banter. And then when you witnessed kind of either, you know, shut down behavior for myself, like I don't know how to navigate that, you guys kind of picked up for us. And I left feeling heard and seen. And I think that my ex would agree with that. It was overall a pleasant experience, even though I would say that I wouldn't recommend.
You're right. Do not recommend divorce, but anyway, but if you have to go through it, then
yeah, if you have to go through it, this is the way to do it.
Yeah.
And I could see where in a more heightened emotional experience, you two would help navigate people through that as well. But yeah, I think I would highly recommend the mediation route, at least to start, and see where it goes. And with a therapist, it was really helpful to be able to go back and have that conversation myself and say, okay, this is what happened and this is how I'm feeling. It helped having that extra support.
Great.
Yeah. And now you can take that experience and work through your clients with that. And I mean, again, my personal divorce 11 years ago, this is why I work in this space, because even though you're an expert in your field, right, when you're going through it, right, it just feels like, okay, where am I? What am I doing? How do I do this?
Right.
So having even just support for the things that you may think you know and can handle, it still helps having that outside perspective. Kerry, any parting thoughts?
No, I think it's all captured in there. I don't have any personal stories to tell, so I won't.
You'll save those for the mediation sessions.
Yes. There's a few
Any,
stories.
well, Shelley, thank you so much. Where can folks find you if they need your services?
They can find us on our website. It's risingtidescounselingcenter.com. And they can reach out to us. We have co-parenting and individual and couples and family therapy available.
Excellent. Whether they need it themselves or for them as a couple or for their children as going through this process. Highly recommend Shelley and her team. I know a few therapists
Absolutely.
on your team who are really skilled at what they do. So highly recommend Shelley. And thank you for joining us today, Shelley.
Thank you, Shelley.
Thank you.
You can learn more about us at collaborativedivorcestrategies.com, about our individual backgrounds and also how we work with clients through the mediation process. And if you feel like you need any of our services, please don't hesitate to reach out for a complimentary consultation. Thank you. This is episode 4, if you're watching these in order. And we've got episode 5 coming up, more about the business valuation and spouses who own businesses or as they're going through divorce. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.